Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf and to a video about non-fiction reads. Yes, I do read a lot of non-fiction, but there's a special reason why I made this video today on the 4th of October, because today is Heidi's birthday, Heidi from My Reading Life. Happy birthday again, Heidi, and if you're not familiar with Heidi, I'll leave a link to her channel down below, and please check her out and subscribe. And Heidi loves nonfiction. She reads fiction as well, but she loves nonfiction. And so I thought, in honor of Heidi's birthday, I make a video about nonfiction reads, about the books that I love, the books that I'm currently reading, and the books that came out recently, or more or less recently, beginning of the year, that I want to read in the future. And the first two books I want to talk to you about are books that I've read and loved earlier this year. And when I look at my nonfiction reads, I think for me at least, it's important to sort of identify a couple of topics that I'm really interested in and then read broadly within that topic. And one of the topics that if you're following me, you're not surprised, I guess, one of the topics that I'm interested in is feminism. So the first book I want to talk to you about is about feminism, and that's Helen Lewis's book, Difficult Women, A History of Feminism in 11 Fights, that came out earlier this year in February. And I read this book together with Mel, formerly from Mel's Bookland Adventure, who also recommended this book that we read it together. Thank you very much, Mel. Helen Lewis is a British journalist. She writes nonfiction pieces for magazines, for The Statesman, and this book is just what the title says. It's about 11 difficult women. They are all British, so it's focusing on feminism in Great Britain, but through time. So you get feminists who fought for the right to vote, suffragettes, until the more present day women who fight for abortion rights. And you have quite a wide variety of women from different classes, different ethical backgrounds, which I thought was really great, that she, not only talked about white women and white feminism, but it's very broad. And what I especially appreciated about this book, which you can sort of gather from the title, Difficult Women, is that she showed these 11 women with the positive and the negative, so to speak. So in other words, I think we have the tendency, if you have somebody who fights for the good cause, we tend to make them heroes and heroines, like these perfect people. And of course they are not. So what Helen Lewis tries to do is show these women in their political fight, what they achieved and what they were fighting for, but also she shows, I should try to make a whole sentence. I'm sorry, Heidi. She shows the more negative aspects. So, for instance, if we look at a suffragette, it might very well be that this particular person has questionable views in other fields. And I think it's a good thing that we don't idolize people who fought for something important and who were important in this fight, but they still are human beings, so they are not perfect. And I really liked that. I also liked the historical overview that you get from the suffragette movement until the present day feminist movement. So it gives you a good historical background or overview of a feminist struggle in Great Britain. I will have to say, I knew a couple of the women, not all of them. There were MPs fighting for equal pay that I've never heard of. So you have to keep in mind that this book is about feminists in Great Britain. So it's all British women, like I said, and some of the background that Helen Lewis gives, especially when you go into the more present day about certain laws or issues that were very prominent in Great Britain. You might not be that familiar with that, and I don't know whether you are interested in it if you don't live in Great Britain. I mean, for me, it was really interesting to read about these women, but I want to give this, precaution warning of sorts that it is really focusing on British issues. And if you're not interested in that, then this book is probably not for you. But I've had great pleasure reading it, and I learned a lot. So Difficult Women was certainly a very successful nonfiction read for me. The second book I want to talk to you about is a biography. And Andrea Wolf's book, The Invention of Nature, Alexander von Humboldt's New World, which came out 2016, and which I read earlier this year with the birthday girl, and we both loved the book. Andrea Wolf was born in India and then moved to Germany. I think one or both of her parents are probably German, because the name Andrea Wolf is very German, but she now lives in Britain, and she is a biographer. And before I get into the book, a more general remark about me and biographies, because many biographies bore me. I need a story. So in other words, if a biography is not much more than an accumulation of data, when a person was born and about the childhood and the parents and the education and what they did, that does not interest me. That is like for me, that's like an extensive Wikipedia article. I need a biographer to tell me a story of a life, not just give me data and information. And Andrea Wolf does that perfectly with the life of Alexander von Humboldt. Von Humboldt was a German explorer and scientist. He was born in 1769 and died in 1859, so he was quite old. And he is most famous for his 5-year-long expedition through South America, which happened 1799 to 1804. And he measured everything. So he made measurements of plants, of temperature. He wrote down everything that he saw. He climbed the highest mountains and measured everything there. He drew the plants. But what made him so special, at least that's what I thought, is that he had a certain view on nature that was quite new at the time, and unfortunately is all but forgotten now, because he viewed nature as an interconnected ecosystem. So he talked about, for instance, the influence that human life had on nature, and he documented it. He was the first one to talk about vegetation zones, which we still use now, so that there are certain vegetation zones all over the world and how they are interconnected. He talked about climate zones and how the climate influences vegetation. So he had this holistic view of nature, which, if you read the book now, sounds very modern, but is not... it needs to be revived, I think, certainly in the current time and age, with the problems that we have with climate change, which he talked about as early as the beginning of the 19th century. I mean, not the extensive climate change that we have now, but the influence that human life has on the climate and on the vegetation. So that was a fascinating book, giving various aspects of Alexander von Humboldt's life, about the political background in that time, the war between Germany and France, Napoleon, and how that influenced, for instance, the fact that you could get money for an expedition. Humboldt was more or less forced to be an advisor to the king in Prussia. So it gives you the life of Alexander von Humboldt, but it definitely goes beyond just data and information. So I love the book. The third nonfiction book that I want to talk to you about is the book that I'm currently reading, and that is Hope Jahren, Lab Girl, which was published in 2016. And I think everybody and their mother who is interested in nonfiction in the field of science has read this book, but me. So Heidi gave this as one of her birthday presents to me in July, when it was my birthday. Hope Jahren is a paleobiologist, so she studies plants. She was born in 1969, by the way. She was a professor at Berkeley, and she now has a professorship in Norway. So she studies plants, the life of plants, how they do what they do, how they grow, how they the paleobiology. So in the past, she studies the history of plants. And this book, I'm about halfway through, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a combination of a memoir and talking about the life of plants. So you learn a lot about a tree and leaves and other plants. I thought that was fascinating, in quite short chapters in between the memoir part of the book, where she talks about a little bit about her childhood and the education, and then focusing on her life as a scientist and a researcher. And you also get not only the personal journey of this very acclaimed scientist, by the way, but also the difficulties, especially with funding, that scientists have to face in the US, because the book is set in the US. It was before she moved to Norway for her professorship. The friendship with her lab partner, Bill, who is the tech guy in the lab. Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And I love memoirs, talking about nonfiction. I think memoirs is probably one of my favorite subgenres of nonfiction. But what I especially appreciate here is, like I said, this combination of more scientific information that you get, but presented in a very accessible and engaging and readable way, with this personal story of one particular scientist. So I don't think that the second half will disappoint me. So it was a great birthday present. Thank you very much, Heidi. And the last two books I briefly want to introduce to you are both books that were published recently, beginning of 2020, that I want to read in the future. And the first one is by Rachel Vorona Cote, Too Much. And I have to look that up, How Victorian Constraints Still Bind Women Today. And the book came out in February. Rachel Vorona Cote is a nonfiction writer living in Washington. And the book explores women who are just too much of something. And I read another book this year, and I have to look that up, I'm sorry, and that is Too Fat, Too Slutty, Too Loud, The Rise and Reign of the Unruly Woman by Anne Helen Peterson. And that book sort of explores the same topic, that women have to conform to a certain image, and if they are too much of something, too loud, too slutty, too much, they are outsiders. And what I understand from this new book by Rachel Vorona Cote, is the same premise, looking in particular at Victorian literature and Victorian women. And shallow me, I have to admit, I love the cover. So this is one of the books in the feminist, broad feminist read that I'm certainly looking forward to. And the second new release nonfiction book that I definitely want to read in the future is a collection of essays edited by Nicole Chung. came out in February of this year, and that's A Map is Only One Story, 20 writers who write about immigration and the meaning of home. That is a book that interests me also on a personal level because I, as you know, if you follow my channel, I was born in Germany and then decided to move to the Netherlands when I was in my mid-30s, lived in Holland for more than 20 years, and now live back in Germany but work in the Netherlands. So this idea of what does it mean, if you immigrate, what is the meaning of the word home in the 21st century, that interests me very much. Nicole Chung, you probably know her because she published a memoir, I think earlier this year or last year, All You Ever Know. She was born. Of course she was born. Her parents are Korean. She was born in the US, but she was given up for adoption. She was adopted by a white family in Oregon. And the book, All You Ever Know, is a memoir about what it means for her to be an adopted child, Korean, and living with a white family. Anyway, that's the editor. But the 20 writers are from have various backgrounds, but they all have some sort of immigration story. And yeah, that's something that I, like I said, personally find very interesting. So I'm looking forward to The Map is Only One Story. Anyway, these were a couple of nonfiction reads that I loved, that I'm reading now, and that I'm looking forward to read, all in honor of Heidi's birthday, who introduced me, by the way, to some really, really great nonfiction that I would probably haven't read if she hadn't recommended the book to me or Buddyread the book to me. So again, a very, very happy birthday, Heidi. And thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this exploration of nonfiction. I hope you're all safe and healthy still. Difficult times. I'm looking forward to your comments, especially about nonfiction reads that you loved, and I'll see you all soon in the next one.